When My Cousin Vinny premiered in 1992, few could have predicted it would become one of the most beloved courtroom comedies of all time. More than 3 decades later, fans are still quoting its iconic lines, but the stories behind the film are proving to be just as entertaining as the movie itself. From surprising casting decisions and unexpected on-set moments to secrets that changed the film forever, the cast has finally revealed details most fans never knew. Did you ever notice the hidden moments and behind-the-scenes truths that were there all along? Join us as we uncover the untold secrets of My Cousin Vinny that will make you see this classic in a whole new way. The road to My Cousin Vinny. Long before My Cousin Vinny became the courtroom comedy audiences still celebrate today, the story almost looked completely different. The film that gave us one of the most unforgettable lawyers in movie history actually began with a simple question that refused to leave one writer's mind. It was a question inspired by a real conversation, and the answer would eventually shape every part of the movie. In the early 1970s, screenwriter Dale Launer met a man who was anxiously waiting for the results of his bar exam. Curious, Launer asked what would happen if he failed. The man casually explained that he would simply take the exam again, and if he failed again, he would keep taking it until he finally passed. That answer immediately sparked another question in Launer's mind. What was the highest number of times someone had ever failed before finally becoming a lawyer? When he learned that one person had reportedly taken the bar exam 13 times before passing, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Somewhere out there, that person was likely practicing law, representing real clients. The idea fascinated him because it turned an ordinary profession into an unsettling what-if scenario. What if the person defending you in court was someone who had struggled more than almost anyone else just to earn a law license? And what if your entire future depended on them? That single thought became the foundation for Vincent LaGuardia Gambini, a lawyer who looked completely out of his depth but still had one last chance to prove everyone wrong. It was the kind of premise that sounded almost too unbelievable to work, yet it would eventually become one of the film's greatest strengths. But having the idea was only the beginning. Before writing the screenplay, Launer knew he couldn't rely on stereotypes or secondhand stories if he wanted the world to feel authentic. So instead of staying behind a desk, he packed his bags and headed south. He rented a car in New Orleans and drove through Mississippi, Alabama, and along the Gulf Coast, experiencing firsthand the places that would later become the backdrop for My Cousin Vinny. Almost everywhere he stopped, there was another small detail that found its way into the script. His rental car became stuck in the mud, something that later influenced one of the movie's memorable moments. Nearly every restaurant served grits, introducing him to a Southern staple that would eventually lead to one of the film's funniest courtroom exchanges. Even the eerie call of a screech owl stayed with him long enough to become part of the atmosphere he was trying to capture. Along the way, Launer also met the district attorney in Butler, Alabama. The man left such a strong impression that years later, when it came time to cast the role of the prosecutor, Launer couldn't help but think back to that meeting. Lane Smith would eventually be cast, bringing many of those same qualities to Jim Trotter III and delivering a performance that became just as memorable as the film's heroes. The trip shaped more than just individual scenes. It completely changed the way Launer viewed the South. Everywhere he went, people welcomed him with warmth and generosity. Yet, whenever he mentioned he was writing a movie set in the South, many became visibly concerned. They worried Hollywood would once again portray them as backward or foolish. Those conversations stayed with him, and instead of turning Southern characters into the punchline, Launer made sure the humor came from misunderstandings and culture clashes rather than mocking the people themselves. It was a decision that quietly gave the film far more heart than audiences may have realized. Even after the script was finished, however, another major decision nearly sent the film down a very different path. When discussions about casting began, Launer believed he already knew exactly who should play Vincent Gambini. His first choice wasn't Joe Pesci, it was Robert De Niro. Confident in his pick, he brought the idea to studio executives, only to be met with uncomfortable silence. They argued that De Niro wasn't funny and questioned whether audiences would even pay to see him in the role. It was a surprising reaction considering how his career would later evolve. Looking back, Lahner always felt time proved him right, as De Niro went on to become one of Hollywood's most successful comedy stars. But by then, another actor had already stepped into the role, and that unexpected decision would end up changing My Cousin Vinny forever. The casting risks that paid off. As the cast slowly came together, it became clear that My Cousin Vinny wasn't finding the obvious choices. Time after time, the filmmakers trusted instinct over convention, and more often than not, those risks paid off in ways no one could have predicted. Looking back now, it's hard to imagine anyone else in these roles, but several key casting decisions almost went in a completely different direction. Director Jonathan Lynn knew almost immediately that Ralph Macchio was the right fit for Bill Gambini, even though he hadn't actually seen The Karate Kid. Instead of relying on Macchio's biggest hit, Lynn watched audition tapes and footage provided by his agent. What stood out wasn't just his acting ability, but how naturally he fit the character. Bill needed to feel intelligent, vulnerable, and believable as an ordinary college student caught in an extraordinary situation. Macchio brought exactly that balance, giving audiences someone they could genuinely root for while the chaos unfolded around him. Joe Pesci, meanwhile, didn't have to look very far for inspiration when creating Vincent Gambini. Rather than inventing the character from scratch, he drew from people he had known growing up in New Jersey. He combined the personalities, mannerisms, confidence, and street-smart attitude of several neighborhood characters into one unforgettable lawyer. That approach is a big reason Vinny never feels exaggerated, despite his larger-than-life personality. Underneath the jokes, he comes across as someone who could easily exist in the real world, making every courtroom victory feel even more satisfying. Ironically, one of the movie's most beloved characters almost disappeared before filming even began. Studio executives weren't convinced that Mona Lisa Vito was essential to the story. They viewed Vinny's outspoken, unemployed hairdresser girlfriend as a distraction and seriously considered removing her from the script altogether. For Dale Lahner, that was a frustrating suggestion because he believed she brought something unique to the film. Instead of giving up on the character, he found a way to make her impossible to cut. He expanded Mona Lisa's role by giving her a memorable argument with Vinny during one of the most stressful moments of the case. On paper, it could have become another predictable scene about a neglected girlfriend complaining for attention. Instead, Lahner flipped the idea on its head. The conversation became sharp, funny, and surprisingly honest, revealing just as much about their relationship as it did about their personalities. Better still, it set up Mona Lisa as far more than comic relief. By the time the courtroom climax arrived, audiences had already learned not to underestimate her. In hindsight, removing her would have stripped away one of the film's biggest surprises. Another role also came down to a fascinating casting battle. Before Mitchell Whitfield landed the part of Stan Rothenstein, another young actor was being seriously considered. That actor was Will Smith, who was still at the beginning of what would become an extraordinary career. At the time, the filmmakers were still deciding exactly what direction they wanted to take with the character, making both actors legitimate possibilities. Whitfield ultimately secured the role, even losing around 25 pounds to better fit the part. It's one of those casting stories that leaves fans wondering how different the film might have felt if history had taken another turn. But perhaps the biggest gamble of all involved an actress almost nobody expected to become the breakout star of the movie. When Marisa Tomei auditioned for Mona Lisa Vito, she had very little film experience compared to many of the actresses the studio could have chosen. Director Jonathan Lynn had noticed her talent while watching footage from another production and believed she possessed a natural comedic ability that audiences hadn't yet seen. Convincing the studio wasn't easy because she was still largely unknown, making the decision feel like a genuine risk. That uncertainty disappeared almost immediately once filming began. From the very first scenes shot in Alabama, it was obvious Tomei had captured something special. Her chemistry with Joe Pesci felt effortless, her comedic timing was flawless, and she gave Mona Lisa a confidence that made every scene more entertaining. What started as one of the studio's biggest concerns quickly became one of the film's greatest strengths. And as the production moved forward, it wouldn't be the last time a surprising decision would leave an unforgettable mark on My Cousin Vinny. The detail that was cut from the movie. By the time filming was underway, the cast wasn't just bringing memorable characters to life, they were also adding details that made those performances feel authentic, while the filmmakers worked behind the scenes to ensure the story held up in ways most comedies never attempt. Some of the movie's biggest strengths came from decisions audiences would never notice, while another surprising idea was quietly left behind. Marisa Tomei may have grown up in Brooklyn, but becoming Mona Lisa Vito still required more than simply using her own voice. Although she was familiar with the neighborhood that inspired the character, her upbringing had been quite different. Her mother, an English teacher, had spent years correcting her speech, meaning the bold Brooklyn accent audiences remember wasn't something she naturally spoke every day. Instead, Tomei carefully shaped the character's voice, creating the unforgettable personality that would ultimately become one of the film's defining highlights. While the performances brought the characters to life, director Jonathan Lynn was just as determined to make the courtroom feel authentic. Having earned a law degree before becoming a filmmaker, he was frustrated by movies that ignored real legal procedure for the sake of drama. Together with Dale Launer's research, Lynn carefully refined the courtroom scenes so that, despite the comedy, the legal process remained remarkably accurate. He even attended a real murder trial in the same Georgia courthouse that inspired the film's courtroom set, borrowing details directly from the proceedings. Several memorable courtroom exchanges, including the prosecutor's distinctive pronunciation and parts of his opening statement, were inspired by what Lynn witnessed firsthand. That attention to detail is one of the reasons My Cousin Vinny has earned lasting praise from lawyers and judges alike. Even so, one important part of Vinny's character never made it to the screen. In Dale Launer's original script, Vinny's repeated failures on the bar exam had a clear explanation. The character was written as being dyslexic, and the screenplay even included visual moments showing the words in legal books becoming scrambled before slowly coming into focus as Vinny struggled to read them. The idea would have explained why an intelligent man needed 6 attempts to pass the bar, while also making his eventual success even more satisfying. However, Jonathan Lynn ultimately decided against including it because he wasn't sure it could be portrayed effectively on screen. As a result, the explanation was removed entirely, leaving audiences to draw their own conclusions about why Vinny's journey to becoming a lawyer had been so difficult. Ironically, one of the film's most overlooked changes also became one of its biggest unanswered questions: the true events that inspired the movie. As realistic as My Cousin Vinny feels, many of its funniest moments weren't simply invented for the screen. Some came directly from real courtrooms, while others were made even more convincing by filming in places where the cast found themselves surrounded by genuine danger. Looking back, it's remarkable how much of the movie's authenticity came from experiences that couldn't have been recreated on a soundstage. One of the film's most memorable courtroom moments actually had its roots in a real legal case. While researching the script, Dale Launer came across an actual jury selection in which a potential juror was asked about capital punishment. At first, the person's response sounded thoughtful and measured, but after hearing the details of the crime, that calm answer disappeared, replaced by an emotional demand for the defendant to be executed. Launer immediately recognized the comic potential of the exchange and adapted the moment for My Cousin Vinny, creating one of the courtroom scenes that audiences still remember decades later. It was another example of reality proving to be just as entertaining as fiction. The commitment to realism didn't stop in the courtroom. When it came time to film the prison scenes, the production didn't build elaborate sets or rely on studio backlots. Instead, the cast and crew spent several days inside an actual state prison in Gainesville, Georgia. Many of the scenes were filmed in the solitary confinement wing, located beside the facility's death row. Simply reaching the filming location required a long walk through the prison, taking nearly 40 minutes from the entrance to the area where cameras were set up. Even with guards escorting them at all times, the atmosphere left a lasting impression on everyone involved. For Ralph Macchio and Mitchell Whitfield, the experience was especially unsettling. As they walked through the prison carrying blankets for one of their scenes, real inmates shouted at them from their cells. The insults and threats were so intense that much of what was said couldn't be included in the final film. Both actors later admitted they were genuinely frightened. and that fear wasn't something they had to act. It was real, adding an authenticity to those early prison scenes that audiences could feel without ever knowing why. The realism extended even further than most viewers realized. The prison guards seen throughout those scenes weren't actors at all. They were actual correctional officers working at the facility, while real inmates also appeared as background extras during several sequences, including the prisoners scene when Bill and Stan first arrive, and during the basketball exercise scene. Their presence gave the environment a level of credibility that would have been difficult to recreate with traditional extras. Ironically, one of the movie's funniest scenes almost disappeared altogether. The misunderstanding between Vinny and Stan was removed from the shooting script before production began, only to be restored after everyone agreed the film was missing something. The filmmakers knew the scene wasn't technically accurate because lawyers and defendants would never have that kind of conversation outside a private interview room. Even so, they decided the comedy was simply too good to lose. It was one of the rare moments where they knowingly bent the rules, and judging by the audience's reaction, it turned out to be exactly the right decision. How My Cousin Vinny pulled off its best moments. Some of My Cousin Vinny's most unforgettable moments look effortless on screen, but behind each one was an incredible amount of planning, problem-solving, and, in one case, a surprising amount of luck. Whether it was a clever sleight of hand, a major storyline that disappeared in the editing room, or a wild animal that somehow delivered the perfect performance, these scenes became iconic for reasons audiences never realized. One of the smartest moments in the film comes early on, when Vinny tries to convince Bill that he's capable of handling the case. During the conversation, Vinny casually performs a card trick, making his argument even more convincing by demonstrating that appearances can be deceiving. It would have been easy for the filmmakers to fake the trick with clever editing, but director Jonathan Lynn refused to take that shortcut. He believed the moment would lose its impact if viewers suspected camera cuts were doing all the work. Instead, Joe Pesci learned the trick himself. Before filming began, he practiced until he could perform it flawlessly in a single uninterrupted take. The finished scene contains no hidden edits to help him, meaning the audience experiences the illusion exactly as Bill does. It's a subtle detail, but it makes Vinny's confidence feel completely genuine. Rather than simply telling everyone he's clever, he quietly proves it right in front of their eyes. Not every scene, however, survived the final cut. As production continued, someone at the studio raised what seemed like a perfectly reasonable question. If Bill was on trial for murder, why wasn't his mother in Alabama supporting him? It was a concern the filmmakers couldn't ignore because, realistically, most parents would have rushed to be there. At the same time, introducing an entirely new character so late in the story threatened to slow the movie's pace. The solution was to create a subplot explaining her absence. Several scenes were filmed revealing that Bill's mother had suffered a heart attack after Vinny arrived in Alabama. Throughout the story, Bill received updates about her condition, giving audiences an explanation for why she never appeared in person. On paper, the idea solved the problem neatly. But once the footage reached the editing room, something unexpected happened. Every time the story shifted away from the trial to discuss Bill's mother, the momentum came to a halt. The filmmakers quickly realized those scenes weren't adding enough to justify the extra running time. They decided to remove the entire subplot and see whether anyone noticed the missing explanation. Surprisingly, almost no one did. Cutting those scenes trimmed several minutes from the movie while keeping the focus exactly where it belonged, proving that sometimes what audiences don't see can be just as important as what remains on screen. Another unforgettable scene also relied on a gamble that could have gone horribly wrong. Throughout the film, Vinny struggles to get a good night's sleep as one loud interruption after another ruins his rest. Just when it seems things can't get any worse, a screech owl appears outside his cabin, creating one of the movie's funniest recurring gags. Most viewers assumed the owl was either a puppet or a carefully controlled movie prop because its timing seemed almost too perfect to be real. In fact, it was an actual owl. The filmmakers brought in a trained bird, but there was no guarantee it would cooperate once the cameras started rolling. To help synchronize its movements with the sound effects that would be added later, the crew discovered a clever trick. Just before filming, they placed a small piece of meat into the owl's beak. A few seconds later, as it swallowed, the bird naturally opened its mouth, creating the perfect moment to add the first screech during post-production. Everything that happened after that was completely unpredictable. The owl looked toward Vinny, turned toward the camera, opened its beak again at just the right time, and behaved almost exactly as the filmmakers had hoped. They couldn't believe their luck. Instead of attempting another take and risking a less convincing performance, they stopped immediately, knowing they had captured something they would probably never be able to recreate. Sometimes the most memorable scenes aren't the result of perfect planning at all. They're the product of preparation, meeting a moment of pure, unexpected fortune. The real story behind Two Utes. By the end of production, My Cousin Vinny had already delivered countless unforgettable moments. But some of its greatest stories happened when the cameras weren't focused on the script at all. From scenes that left the cast struggling to keep straight faces to dialogue born from a real misunderstanding. The final stretch of the movie's journey was filled with happy accidents that became part of its lasting legacy. One of the funniest performances in the film came from Austin Pendleton as the hopelessly nervous public defender. Director Jonathan Lynn cast his longtime friend because he knew Pendleton's natural stutter would make the character feel authentic. What Lynn didn't anticipate was just how funny the performance would become. During filming, he found himself laughing so hard that he had to hide behind the camera to avoid distracting the actors. Mitchell Whitfield had the same problem. In several shots, what looks like Stan holding back tears is actually Whitfield trying not to burst into laughter while Pendleton delivered his painfully awkward courtroom performance. Those genuine reactions only made the scene feel even more natural. Another iconic moment was never planned at all. The famous exchange about the two Utes wasn't something Dale Launer originally wrote into the screenplay. Instead, it came directly from a real conversation between Jonathan Lynn and Joe Pesci while they were preparing the film in New York. Pesci casually used the word. Lynn misunderstood what he had said, and the two found themselves repeating the conversation almost exactly as audiences would later see it on screen. Realizing how funny the misunderstanding was, Lynn immediately turned it into one of the film's most memorable exchanges. Decades later, it remains one of the most quoted scenes in the entire movie. The production also found itself celebrating an unexpected milestone. The night before filming one of Vinny's prison scenes, Joe Pesci won the Academy Award for Goodfellas. When he arrived on set the next day, he couldn't resist having a little fun with his recent victory. During the first take, he climbed into bed holding his Oscar statue as though it were another prop in the film. The playful moment never made the final cut, but the footage became a favorite, behind-the-scenes memory for the cast and crew. Although the story takes place in rural Alabama, most of My Cousin Vinny was actually filmed across several small towns in Georgia. Aside from the courtroom, which was built as a set, nearly every location audiences see is real. That decision helped keep production costs down while giving the movie a level of authenticity that studio backlots couldn't match. Even today, fans can still visit several recognizable filming locations, including the famous Sacco Suds convenience store. Perhaps the film's greatest achievement, however, came long after it left theaters. While audiences embraced it as a comedy, members of the legal community admired it for an entirely different reason. Lawyers, law professors, judges, and even Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia have praised the film for its remarkably accurate portrayal of courtroom procedure. It has been referenced in legal education, discussed in classrooms, and even included in legal textbooks as an example of effective trial advocacy. For a movie built around jokes and culture clashes, that's an extraordinary legacy, and one few courtroom dramas have managed to achieve. Why Lawyers Still Swear by My Cousin Vinny. As the years passed, My Cousin Vinny stopped being just another successful comedy and became something much bigger. It earned respect from unexpected places, inspired new projects that never quite happened, and continued finding its way into popular culture decades after its release. Few films have managed to stay this relevant for so long, and the reasons become even more surprising as the story continues. One of the movie's greatest honors came from the very people it had spent 2 hours making laugh. The American Bar Association ranked My Cousin Vinny among the greatest legal films ever made, praising everything from its courtroom arguments to its remarkably accurate handling of criminal procedure and expert witness testimony. Even Vincent Gambini himself earned a place on the association's list of the greatest fictional lawyers. For screenwriter Dale Launer, the recognition meant as much as winning an Academy Award. After all, earning praise from legal professionals for a courtroom comedy was something almost nobody could have imagined when the script was first written. The film's awards journey didn't end there. Marisa Tomei received the biggest surprise of her career in one of the most ordinary settings imaginable. She wasn't attending a glamorous event or waiting backstage at a television studio when the Academy Award nominations were announced. Instead, she was asleep on a friend's couch. She suddenly woke to shouting from another room and for a brief moment thought the excitement meant her pregnant friend had gone into labor. Instead, everyone was celebrating because she had just been nominated for Best Supporting Actress. A short time later, Tomei completed the fairy tale by winning the Oscar, putting to rest years of speculation and proving that the Academy's decision had been exactly as announced. The movie's success naturally sparked conversations about bringing Vinny Gambini back for another adventure. Over the years, interest in a sequel came and went. At one point, Joe Pesci wanted to return, while Marisa Tomei was hesitant. Later, their positions reversed before eventually lining up again, with both stars open to revisiting their characters. One proposed idea would have sent Vinny to Europe for an entirely new legal adventure. Despite the enthusiasm from those involved, the studio ultimately felt too much time had passed, leaving the sequel as one of Hollywood's most intriguing what-ifs. Joe Pesci, however, wasn't quite finished with Vincent Gambini. Several years after the film's release, he revisited the character in an unexpected way by recording a music album as Vinny himself. Long before acting made him famous, Pesci had performed as a singer, so combining music with one of his most beloved characters felt like a natural fit. The album featured original songs alongside a duet with Marisa Tomei, reprising Mona Lisa Vito, and even earned a spot on the Billboard Heat Seekers chart, proving audiences were still eager to spend time with Vinny beyond the courtroom. The film's influence eventually stretched far beyond Hollywood. An Indian adaptation entered development after its producers received permission to create a movie loosely inspired by the original premise. But as production progressed, legal disputes emerged over how closely the new version resembled My Cousin Vinny. The disagreement ultimately ended in a financial settlement, becoming yet another unexpected chapter in the movie's long history. Perhaps the clearest sign of the film's lasting impact came years later during one of football's biggest controversies. While answering questions during the Deflategate investigation, New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick unexpectedly referenced Mona Lisa Vito's famous automotive expertise. The comment quickly reached Marisa Tomei, who immediately shared the moment with Joe Pesci. Both stars found the reference hilarious. More than 2 decades after its release, My Cousin Vinny was still finding new audiences, new admirers, and new ways to remind everyone why it remains one of the most beloved courtroom comedies ever made. What fact shocked you the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.